Practicum Project Level 5, Introduction to Communications, Jennifer Hanna. Listening. Throughout the movie, they use evaluative listening, meaning they're trying to persuade the other person into going where they want them to go, and it is used when they are trying to persuade Jonas to go to a certain direction because it could be dangerous. Empathetic listening. This is used when they are speaking to Joe's Aunt Meg, and when Bill is talking with Melissa and she tells him that she is leaving him. The character is being empathetic to the other person. Comprehensive listening is used often when they are talking amongst each other about which direction to head or what is popping up on the radar. They are listening for facts and information that will help them to intercept a tornado. Verbal messaging. In this scene and video clip, Joe's paralanguage is very strong. Joe's pitch and tone show her emotion and strong feelings. Bill also uses many different paralanguage to get his point across to Joe. Melissa hears Joe and Bill's conversation over the two-way radio, and she can hear in Bill's voice by his pitch and tone that he still has feelings for Joe. Nonverbal messaging. In the scene where Joe and Melissa are standing at the counter ordering drinks, Melissa asks Joe if she is still in love with Bill. Joe refuses to make eye contact with Melissa. Joe's nonverbal signals are very strong and convey a message that leads Melissa to believe that Joe is still in love with Bill. Melissa uses strong paralanguage, and it shows that she is concerned that Joe is still in love with Bill. Interpersonal relationships. While Joe and Bill are chasing a very dangerous tornado, they realize that Jonas and his team are right in the path of the storm. Bill and Joe are afraid that the twister is going to shift and is going to land on Jonas and his team. Bill tells Jonas to hang back because of the shift in directions, but Jonas chooses not to listen and tells Bill to get off the frequency. Bill continues to try and warn him, but Jonas turns off the radio. The twister shifts and sucks up Jonas's vehicle, and he ends up being killed. This is an example of both defensive and supportive elements. Jonas is defensive about listening to Bill, even though it is a symmetrical relationship. He sees Bill as a threat that he is trying to get through the storm first. Bill is being supportive of Jonas by giving him information to help keep him safe. Joe was also being supportive by telling him his packs were too light, and again, Jonas would not listen. Interpersonal relationships. In the scene above, a deadly tornado hits Waukeeta, where Joe's Aunt Meg lives. The crew went to check on Meg, only to find her stuck in her house and injured. Bill and Joe get Meg out of the house. Joe and Bill showed Meg supporting nature by rescuing her. Joe is also using supportive words by adapting to the situation that Meg was in so she could help Meg keep Meg calm and show her empathy. Joe and Meg were communicating on a relationship level. There are 3 types of interpersonal relationships. Friendship is a unique kind of relationship because your involvement is voluntary. You can walk away at any time, therefore friendships that you choose to continue over time are usually pleasurable and supportive, and you want to be in them. Family relationships are the longest lasting. This includes the family you were born into and the family you build as an adult, which may include your significant other and children and maybe even some friends. Romantic relationships are the most complex. You share your deepest thoughts, feelings, and ideas with another person. In doing this, you open yourself up to being hurt if feelings are not mutual. It can also be the most rewarding. There are 2 types of conflict. Constructive conflict. This balances the interests of both parties to maximize the mutual gains. One must realize one's own interests and the other's interests to be able to find a common solution. Destructive conflict. This type of conflict occurs when the parties involved forget their purpose and turn into getting even, retaliating, or hurting one another. No one is satisfied with the outcome, and negativity tends to carry on into the next conflict. I think that this is an example of Joe and Bill and Jonas's argument, they were just trying to hurt one another, and no one was satisfied with the outcome of it, and it did carry on into the next conversation that Bill and Jonas had, which was the conversation between them when chasing the tornado, and Jonas would not listen to Bill. In the above scene, you will see conflict between Jonas and Bill. Bill is being interviewed about the invention. Dot 3, which is the same design concept of Joe and Bill's Dorothy. Bill is upset because it was their idea, and Jonas stole it. This shows a great example of aggressive communication. Bill is dominating the conversation. He is speaking in a high pitch and tone. He is in Jonas's face, and it could result in a more aggressive response from Jonas. Bill could have spoken with Jonas and used assertion with consequences. Bill could have told Jonas to not use his invention of Dot 3, and if he did use it, then there would be consequences. Review. There are many ways to communicate with people. Twister shows good and bad communication styles and what some of the outcomes are. There are scenes that you can clearly see that there could have been a better way to communicate or better listening. It is best to use basic assertion when communicating with people. It is also not always best to avoid conflict. There are times when it is unavoidable, and there are proper ways that you can deal with it. People tend to think that it's best to avoid conflict, but that's not always the case. My evaluation. The communication process, from my point of view, is that communication is complicated, and as humans, we make it even more complicated by the use of nonverbal language and just the way we think. It starts with the relationship and realizing what your needs are as far as social and physiological. You use communication every single day in your life, and if you are an aggressive communicator, it is going to be difficult to communicate with other people effectively. You need to be assertive and non-judgmental. You can't take back words that have been spoken, so you really need to think before you speak. You also better be ready to deal with conflict when it arises, because it is just a matter of time of when. I have learned that conflict is unavoidable in communication, and it is best if it is dealt with when it arises. I always tried to avoid conflict before, but I have learned a lot over the last 5 weeks about how to handle it and how to be an assertive communicator. There are so many different aspects that go into communication: culture, emotions, body language, and listening. If one of these elements is miscommunicated, it can create a big problem. If you're not an effective listener, it's hard to be an assertive communicator. I think that with all the different elements that go into communication, this is why it is so complex and confusing. As humans, we create our own perception of ourselves and others, and this is why we judge people and communicate the way we do. The references I used were YouTube, our book, our course material, and seos.org.